not exactly at the COP26 venue. So we didn't get a lot of people here physically, but we have the right people here. So with those people who are here and all of you who are joined us virtually, I would like to now open our workshop today on the last mile of climate finance. How can we actually capitalize the last mile of climate finance? There's billions of dollars being pledged and trillions of dollars on its way for climate change mitigation and adaptation. And a lot of people are questioning, how is this money going to actually get to the people who really need it, the people on the ground? And so today I have with me Earthbank, the CEO of Earthbank, Tom Duncan, who is the visionary behind starting this climate fintech and has years of experience both in banking, finance, as well as regenerative agriculture. We also have Bremley, who is the co-founder of Worldview Impact Foundation and has worked with many multilateral organizations, including the World Bank, UNDP, and others. As well as we have joining all the way from Meghalaya, Ivan from Meghalaya Institute of Governance, and as well as the Meghalaya Basin Development Authority. Thank you, Ivan, for joining us at this very, very crucial event. Sorry that you couldn't be here with us here in Glasgow. Also Tom, but it's great that you can join us virtually. So we're going to start with Tom sharing about his vision of how this last mile of climate finance can actualize and what are some of the benefits of nature-based solutions. And then we will move on to Bremley sharing a very amazing case study from Meghalaya from the Eric Bremley Lyngdoh farm. And finally, we will hear from Ivan his perspective on policy and how we can scale up this effort for millions of farmers in the northeast of India, but also for farmers across the world. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Tom to tell us more about his vision of Earthbank and how it's working on achieving the last mile of climate finance. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you so much, Rishabh, for the kind introduction, and welcome to people tuning in and joining us here in this great workshop. So, yeah, I'd like to share a bit about what we're doing at Earthbank and what our vision is for fulfilling the last mile of climate finance and how to catalyze it. So a bit about my history. I worked as an environmental and social scientist for many years in management consulting, working inside of government, catchment management authorities, state governments, working with federal governments to develop new policies of how to restore ecosystems, how to develop ecosystem services, marketplaces, and create new financial mechanisms to catalyze climate finance and sustainable finance more broadly. And so I've been applying those skill sets to capital markets to create new models. And really, what we've seen here at COP26 is just a huge, massive surge of support for nature-based solutions to be part of the big solution to drawing down, storing carbon in landscapes so that we can meet the 2030, 2040, and 2050 collective climate goals. What we're seeing, though, is there's a really big gap in the level of ambition and what can actually be achieved with today's current infrastructure in place. So at this COP26, there was a declaration from asset managers, banks, and corporations with about $130 trillion of assets under management, committing to net zero. Now, nature-based solutions can make up a very large portion of carbon removals to 2030, 2040, and 2050. But the infrastructure that it requires to deliver the last mile of climate finance and deliver the last mile of carbon payments and ecosystem service payments to the communities all around the world who are sitting on the world's carbon reserves, that infrastructure does not exist yet. And so we need to really imagine what does that look like. And at Earthbank, we've been actively building that infrastructure to make it all possible. So I'd like to share a little bit about, firstly, what does last mile of climate finance actually mean? So generally the last mile problem in any industry, whether it's moving goods or services from a centralized hub to many distributed or decentralized locations, and this is complex and costly due to the different scale, many variables, many different actors, many different motivations, many different incentives or disincentives. And then what does that look in terms of climate finance? So currently money moves from centralized locations, whether it be central banks, treasuries, governments, development banks, commercial banks, and then getting that money from point A to B to C to D and so on down into the digital wallet or cash wallet or digital finance and banking app on a smartphone or a non-smartphone, which is all based on text based money sending. And so it's actually really quite complex when you break down this problem of the last mile of climate finance and the last mile of carbon payments and incentives. And so what we've been doing at Earthbank is running some prototypes of actually solving that problem and demonstrating it. And so just checking if now is the appropriate time to share some slides on the screen and to share a little bit about.
Yes, please, Tom. It would be great to get some visuals on this, how Earthbank is working on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've been doing is really prototyping and doing minimum viable products. And then now we're scaling up to fulls, and we're actually scaling up as a company, an organization, a network. And what we've developed is a credible carbon and climate finance marketplace to scale rapid carbon storage with data-driven, nature-based solutions. And our mission is to sequester about 30 gigatons of carbon in 10 years, and to be an enabler of that. Be an enabler piece of infrastructure for that. Here is, the roadmap, the exponential roadmap ahead of us. And you can see that nature-based solutions is making up a very significant portion. But the point in time where we are right now, it's actually a very small part of actual carbon drawdown, carbon storage, and carbon removal. And the reason is the last mile infrastructure has not been there yet. That's what we're solving. Now, nature-based solutions, as I was saying, could draw down 1/3, maybe 33% of the CO2 required by 2030. And yeah, this is, we need help from nature, and we need the infrastructure to be able to do it. Now, nature-based solutions are a powerful mechanism to drive equitable economic recovery with lasting benefits for rural communities, but they lack the carbon and ecosystem service payment incentives, quick and easy funding, and sales infrastructure for their agri-commodities that are sustainably produced to scale rapidly enough. And so the cycle of poverty is driving a lot of deforestation and land and water degradation, and in fact, carbon emissions. Now, carbon and finance marketplace is what we've developed. And the first problem we're solving is access. If you're on a 2-hectare plot in rural northeast India or the Sundarbans in West Bengal where we've been working, you may have 2-hectare plot as a maximum in some cases. Now, how do you actually bank and monetize that? The carbon additionality that you can prove is permanent and ongoing stored, and that you can prove that there's no leakage. How do you actually get paid for that? Right now, you can't, and the infrastructure hasn't been scaled up. So what we're doing at Earthbank is enabling anyone to bank their carbon with Earthbank. And what does that mean? It means you can deposit carbon. It also means we start to verify it using satellites and remote sensing. So credible. So we've created the world's most accurate and annually rated and audited carbon offsets by developing satellite and remote sensing AI technology that can measure the soil in trees, vegetation, and soil in grasslands, open woodlands, and developing new ecosystems all the time. Green bonds is the last bit of the equation. We've been issuing digital green bonds on blockchain for several years now, and it can deliver low-cost finance to projects. In many cases, rural poor communities don't have fair and equitable access to low-cost and affordable finance. And in an era of near zero interest rates, or in some cases negative interest rates, why hasn't the infrastructure been enabled to get that the capital pipes flowing and the technology pipes flowing to the communities who need it the most? And ultimately, the planet needs it the most to support our life support systems ecologically. So you bring together opening up global access and credibility and finance, and all of a sudden you have a way to bridge the last mile of climate finance. And certainly we're not alone in this. There's a huge ecosystem emerging. The convergence of digital payments, remote sensing AI, forest, and soil carbon, and then the financing of that and marketplaces. So certainly we're not alone, but we came up with this term, delivering the last mile of climate finance, because we saw that there was this big gap. So what we've got in a marketplace is, on the one side, there's nature-based solutions projects, where farmers, forest stewards can sell audited carbon, access funding, and can receive carbon payments, which can be up to 33% of farmer income, which is really life-changing. And on the other side of our marketplace, we have customers who buy audited carbon and also invest in digital sustainable land bonds and regenerative land bonds. We use blockchain to track an ecological blockchain, so ledgers, to track the carbon offsets and credits, and also bonds. And HSBC claimed in their sustainability reports from years ago, you could reduce green bond issuance costs by tenfold by utilizing digital blockchain technologies, distributed ledgers, and that's why we've been going in that direction. We've got venture backing from the European Space Agency and their incubator, and gaining access to satellite imagery anywhere on the planet. And our deep learning models, some are proprietary, some are open source, achieve 99% accuracy for counting trees, counting vegetation, measuring carbon, and counting different types. So that's what we're doing. We invite people to connect with us with your nature-based solutions projects. We're here to help, and we aim to deliver that last mile of climate finance to nature-based solutions projects, also for corporates and SMEs. We aim to be a trusted partner with credible carbon offsets from projects like in Meghalaya, in the northeast of India, which we're going to hear about soon, and also the Sundarbans mangroves, which is the entire watershed that's covering the entire watershed of the north, east, and West Bengal, which is also in the far east of India. So I'll stop there, and there's just some few images of our projects. We'll let others talk about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. That was an amazing presentation of how both the carbon markets, but also the finance side, how they sort of integrate, and also you talked about the verification using the satellite data for verifying the carbon. So there was a lot there, but we will come back to questions and discussions on this. I would like to now move on to Bremley. So Bremley, if you can join me here physically in the space. And Bremley, would you like to tell us a bit more about when Tom mentions Meghalaya, like you are from Meghalaya, and it's an amazing, beautiful hotspot of biodiversity and virgin forests. How did you come to this vision of transforming this landscape in the Eric Bremley Lyngdoh farm? And what support and what was the partnership you've had with Earth Bank so far? But maybe in the beginning you can tell us a little bit more about your initiative, like, because you actually did this on the ground. You're not just talking about it. So we'd love to hear more about the initiative.
Yes. So greetings from COP, the Climate Circus, number 26 here in Glasgow. We're in a very special church. I'd like to thank the people that are hosting us in this church. And I must say that Boris Johnson is back today, and there's a draft agreement, 7 pages long. I don't know what's going to be coming out. But the most important thing I want to share with you is that 100 countries have pledged to end deforestation in 100 countries by 2030. Now that's big. And Prime Minister Modi was also here, and he made a commitment for India to go net zero by 2070. Of course, it was 20 years later than 2050, but hey, something for the subcontinent. I'm here to learn at COP, and I'm happy to announce that 60 reforestation leaders and ecosystem warriors from 60 organizations gathered outside the COP in Loch Lomond. And collectively, all of us are planting 250 million trees a year. So we gathered in a circle in the beach in Loch Lomond, and I said, how about we double that to 500 million as a legacy for Glasgow, and restore the Highlands here, because there's lots of land in Scotland, as a legacy to Scotland, and then target to reach 1 billion trees a year by 2030. And we said, yes, instead of competing, we will start in the spirit of collaborating, co-creating, and building consensus. Because we're all tree people, which is great. So our initiative in Northeast India,
Eric Bremley,
the Eric Lyngdoh Bremley farm started in 2010 with my father, and obviously he left for the stars in 2012. So we wanted to honor him and build upon his legacy. Hence it's called the Eric Bremley Lyngdoh Agroforestry Project Site. And the farmers wanted to integrate rubber trees with papaya, with bananas, and also with pineapples. So it's an experiment, it's a prototype. And when I met Tom, I was introduced to Tom back in 2015 through a common friend. He wanted to come and see our other initiative in Sri Lanka called Paradise Farm. And I really wanted to replicate Paradise Farm, growing green tea and cinnamons and herbs in a jungle, in the rainforest in Sri Lanka, and bring it home to Meghalaya. So the inspiration was born in Sri Lanka. And then when I finally got to meet Tom in 2017 or 18 at the co-dialogue on land and security, he said, "Deja vu, tell me more." We were talking about mangroves then, because then I was working in Myanmar. And he said, "I would like to do something in the Highlands, in your farm." So he said, how about we send Rishabh and Bo to come to Meghalaya, meet the Chief Minister, Conrad Sangma, go meet Ivan, who was also at CO, and let's do something together out of the spirit from CO, which was heavily involved in the creation of Meghalaya in my state 50 years ago, using the principles of initiatives of change and moral empowerment. So that's how it all started. And now, thanks to Rishabh and Bo, who came home, who also came to our sacred forest in my ancestral village, Omaplan, and saw that the trees are actually being eaten by some kind of bacteria, and he's trying to find ways to help heal that disease that's eating these ancient 1,000-year-old trees. But at the same time, he also went to the agroforestry project, and he said, let's task these European Space Agency satellites to zoom into your little agroforestry plot and count your trees. And they actually counted all our trees and our pineapples in precise details and calculated the soil carbon, plugged it into the AI and machine learning technology, and hence, voila, we have the first space-age soil to space and space to soil carbon project monitored by Earth Plus verification real time, and we could do it every 5 days. So last year when I got stuck, even Rishabh was in India during the COVID-19, I actually went to meet farmers in 300 villages and collected data from them, from all their farms. And now I'm happy to announce, thanks to COVID, we have 100,000 farmers that have joined our Hill Farmers Union. And they want to use the Earth Bank app to get microloans, which we will help de-risk, because our farmers borrow at 25% because it's so high risk. So Earth Bank will help us and our farmers give peer-to-peer lending loans at 5%, 6%, or even less by de-risking them because they are regenerative farmers. And we can have young people like the Greta generation who are demonstrating in the street. They can give like 100 quid, 200 quid, and loan from their European banks or American banks, which they don't get any interest. They could get up to 5 a year. through peer-to-peer lending. This technology is now possible thanks to Tom and Rishabh and Bo and the entire team at Earth Bank. So if we can do something in India, we can tell Modi, hey mate, we can do it faster. You don't have to wait till 2070, we can do it before that. Or we need to mobilize millions of farmers across India to restore the ecosystems from the Himalayas in the north, where we are restoring cloud forest, all the way to the Indian Ocean, and all along the coastline of India, where millions of hectares of mangroves need to be restored. And we can pay those farmers, we can pay those fishermen who are maintaining the integrity of the ecosystems, all the way from the glaciers in the Himalayas down to the Indian Ocean in the south, in the sea. So from source to sea, Earth Bank will journey with us through our rivers and our streams and our valleys, all the way to the mangrove ecosystem, where we are working with another group that are protecting the forests of the type and protecting the habitat of the Royal Bengal tigers that are also an endangered species. So I would welcome you guys to come on a journey with me and Rishabh, and SP Tom should come down too, and all of you watching, come and see our forest of the tide and come and see our cloud forest up in Meghalaya. And I'm very happy that Ivan is also going to engage in this next project with the government on earth banking, land banking, and helping farmers restore land and also give them carbon credits through regenerative farming, which Earth Bank has the special technology of putting sensors in the ground, calculating the amount of carbon of about 3 tons per hectare that can reward farmers, not only trees, but also through farming, possible through Earth Bank. So thank you very much, Rishabh. This is all I have to say. Keep it short and sweet. But let's get the ball rolling and scale this up very quick. We've got just 9 years left before we hit 2030 in this UN decade for ecosystem restoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Brem. That was really, really awesome. A big round of applause for both Brem as well as Tom. And I think when I was in Meghalaya, what Bremley is talking about is actually incredible, because he is integrating food security, livelihood, mitigation, and adaptation. And the advantage of using satellite technology like AI, as he said, we can actually measure and see all those amazing effects. Because if you don't see it, people don't believe it. And so if you can actually show this to investors, you can show this to people who are sitting with all the money and looking for the projects, then you can finally build the trust to channel the investment and the money. So critical intervention what you did, and I think the partnership with Earth Bank and the European Space Agency is sort of building that bridge of trust that can enable those floodgates of finance to flow into projects like these. And so Ivan, so you are now sitting on the Meghalaya Institute of Governance, you're in the government, you're working on the watershed development. When I visited you in Meghalaya, some awesome work with what you're doing on the ground. What do you see in your work when you're looking at the farmers there? I mean, 70 to 80% of the land is owned by the local people, indigenous people. Very unique, actually, because not many states in India can actually say that. Most of the forest is owned by the forest department. But here is a unique opportunity for you to create livelihood benefits. What Tom said. Almost 35% of their income could be coming from carbon and other ecosystem services. What do you see happening from a policy perspective? Where are you at with your climate interventions in the state of Meghalaya? Over to you, Ivan.
Thank you, Rishabh. And thanks to Tom, Bo, and Bremley who visited us. And it was really an eye-opener on the kind of opportunities that Earth Bank has presented to us at that point of time. We have not been staying behind on that. I've been working a lot on that issue. And because it works very well within the framework of what we were implementing under the Meghalaya Basin Development Authority. That is in an integrated approach which we had for the Basin Development Livelihood Program. This program, the Basin Program, which was a flagship program of the government of Meghalaya, was one that attracted investors from various funding agencies to our externally aided projects. Now we have a project of livelihoods from IFAD, I have a project on ecosystem restoration from World Bank. I have a project on community forestry from the Japanese. And now I'm having a project on restoration of degraded lands for the catchment areas from the German Bank. Now, these are just small interventions, but what you're talking about is going to be of a larger scale. Now, taking that, we are talking this on the backdrop of the COP26, where climate change issues needs to be addressed. Now, we have shown, you have experienced how we have taken up Springs initiative, developing the springs for giving us the kind of water that we need. Now, with the presence of Bremley and Rishabh and Bo in Meghalaya and Tom, and the ability that they have mobilized with many farmers through the Hill Farmers Union, the policy now is that Government of Meghalaya has started a new program which is called the Farmers Mobilization Program, where we are going to mobilize farmers across the state. And issues that have been spoken by Tom and by Bremley, these are the issues that will be covered under this Farmers Mobilization Program. Now, another initiative which I've done from Meghalaya Institute of Governance was creation of land banks. As rightly said by Rishabh, it is not just 70%, but 95% of the land in Meghalaya is owned by the communities. Well, but unfortunately, these lands have not been properly mapped. So what we're doing is now, we are bringing this under a land bank system by which these lands can be demarcated and then they can be taken up for, as you said, financing from the kind of style of financing that Thomas mentioned. Now, we in Meghalaya now, we are taking off two things. One, I was just on board with Conrad Sharma after your visit, and he is called for a presentation on the 16th of this month, whereby we are going to talk about the issues that can be addressed on climate change. I'm very happy that you have connected me to what is going on with the COP26 and the kind of issues, the kind of promises that have been made by Mr. Modi are issues that we will need to follow very closely. The targets of 2017 and the targets of 2030 are two different things. But for us, next year, Meghalaya is celebrating 50 years of its statehood. And it is at this point of time that I would like to request all of you, how are we going to celebrate this? Since as Bremley has mentioned, the initiatives of change was also responsible for the creation of Meghalaya. Now, 50 years down the line, when we are celebrating 50 years, I wish that the issues that have been raised here at COP26 can be discussed and can be organized, a similar event which we will call the COP-NER, the COP Northeastern Region Meghalaya at 50, where we will bring in people from across the 8 northeastern states.
Wonderful,
I'm going to suggest this to Mr. Conrad Sharma when I meet him on the 16th, that this is the way forward for us. And the presentation that Tom has given, I've taken down some notes of that. Other things. So for right now, I would like to highlight one thing, is that we have developed a certain model for our Shillong watershed, as mentioned by Rishabh. Now this watershed system is we are bringing clans, we are bringing individual landowners, and we are bringing village communities. These 3 categories of people will adopt agroforestry, sustainable forest management, natural regeneration, plantation, silviculture, and good farm practices. These practices will lead to watershed services, clean water, and sustainability of the source. Who will reap these benefits? It will be the citizens of the state and the government agencies. Now, considering that we have a plan for this, we have already also come up with certain detailed working plans for all of this. I would like to share with you, and perhaps you can give suggestions of this. So these are some of the steps and the policies that we have proposed for the watersheds and the payment for services thing. And for example, we have already done a feasibility study. Okay, we have always done the design and the collaboration of all these studies. They were on the baseline studies, the partners, the developing guidelines, and the packages along with the template how to do about this. Most importantly, which will make your help perhaps from Tom and the team, is the guidelines for financial transactions, the monitoring and evaluation, which I'm sure you have the wide range of expertise amongst all of you. Then when it comes to implementation of this, so we have prepared certain steps that needs to be taken up. One of them, important, is how do we operationalize financial mechanism for these projects. Then for that, we will need the assistance of the experts like Tom and his team, Rishabh, and then the hand-holding and support. Now, this will be one of the most important projects for us, and I look forward to putting this into the meeting when I'm meeting with the Honorable Chief Minister on 16th, that this is the way forward for us, Meghalaya, for starting from Meghalaya 50 years. Because if we are looking for adapting to the climate change, we have so many plans, but what Tom has presented today, what Tom has shown today, is something totally different rather than just planting a tree. It is also benefiting, the communities are benefiting from the forest that they already have. As of now, communities are not benefiting. Tom, our communities are not benefiting from the forest they have. So it is useless. So unless we can convert this into monetary benefits, only then can forests be maintained, they can be cared for, and the communities will benefit. Unless that happens, it doesn't matter whether it's COP26 or it's COP76, we'll be discussing the same issues.
Thank you, Ivan. That's really awesome. I would just like to bring in Tom here. Tom, on this, the finance aspect of how can we sort of pay people for ecosystem services and the financing guidelines that Ivan is there something we can offer as Earth Bank for them, and what role can we play in that?
Absolutely, you're spot on, Ivan, and thanks Rishabh for bringing this up. That it's COP26 now. We don't want to be seeing COP76 and seeing the same dynamics happen. And this ecosystem services payments is really the linchpin to us having a stable climate, a livable climate, a safe climate. And banks, asset managers, lenders, organizations, multi-rail payment companies, fintech companies, this is one of the biggest challenges of our times. And we say climate change is the big challenge, but what is the underlying challenge? Of course we have renewable energy and the transition away from fossil fuels and to storage and decarbonization, but this very complex, nested, thorny problem of how to pay individual landholders, or maybe they're not even landholders and they don't have land tenure, but they're living around the ecosystems that need to be conserved. 1, for their ecosystem functionality, 2, for their carbon, and 3, most importantly, it's the local food security of those communities and their sustainable livelihoods. So I would love to work with you, Ivan, and the Basin Development Commission and the government and Earth Bank. We would love to work with you and support you on this. It's so important. You're in the headwaters of the catchments that drain to the Bay of Bengal. If I remember correctly, I think you have, in some cases, more than 10 meters of rain per year. Is that right? Yeah. So it's it's incredibly important to be able to soak up that water to prevent downstream flooding and the climate chaos and catastrophe that is currently happening in downstream. And I know you guys have been doing, and amazing people, women, the community doing amazing, the Hill Farmers Union doing all the right things to try to store and slow down the water in the landscape. And, there's always more that we can do. And I think what we can help with is the financing of watershed-style green bonds, and also the carbon reporting and monitoring and verification, auditing of the ecosystem dynamics that are actually occurring, which can trigger the payments for ecosystem services such as water purification, soil carbon sequestration, tree carbon sequestration, bee pollination, you name it, there are all of these services being provided. And it's the challenge of our time to get those incentive payments to those farmers and traditional custodians of the ecosystems around the world, where about 50% of all carbon reserves are stored. So we'd love to work with you on this challenge, and I'm really looking forward to it. You being at the top of the headwaters in the foothills of the Himalaya, in Meghalaya, and all the way down to the Sundarbans, where the mangroves and the rivers meet the ocean. This is a whole of catchment, whole of watershed approach that is really powerful and unique. And I think it's going to inspire so many people, so many governments, and so many financiers around the world about this is how you can do it at scale, covering hundreds of millions of people. So let's get working, and yeah.
Thank you, Tom. I would now like to sort of open the floor for about 20 minutes. You've heard the vision from Tom. You've heard like a case study of what Bremley is doing on the ground there with the agroforestry project. We've also heard how that can be scaled up with what Ivan is saying from a policy perspective of paying people. I mean, what Bremley has done, he's actually invested his own time, own money, own energy, and millions and billions of farmers around the world today are being expected to transition from chemical farming to agroforestry and other ways of doing farming. No one is paying them for these ecosystem services. No one is paying them for the carbon. They have to put their sweat and time into this, and we expect cheap organic food. Today I was trying to get an organic banana, but I couldn't even get an organic banana in Sainsbury's, for example. So if we expect that transition to happen, what is our responsibility as consumers and investors? So I would leave now this question to you in the audience of comments and questions. So Jeffrey, over to you. Jeffrey Lee.
Unmute yourself, Jeff.
Unmute.
Yeah.
This is very exciting and interesting. When do you think the first farmer will be paid in Meghalaya? When will be the first actual instance of this happening?
Jeff, would be great if you can introduce yourself for the audience to know who you are also.
Jeffrey Lee, I'm a journalist. I'm semi-retired now, but I'm writing for the Eye, from COP and from the Daily Mail, and for Open Democracy. It was broadcasting this morning, so seems to be in demand again.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Just to quickly, do you want us to restate your question there, Jeff?
So I'm interested, a journalistic question, but I'm interested in when the first money changes hands, when the first actual payment is done, when something practical happens on the ground, because then it becomes publicizable.
Absolutely, so carbon payments have been sent through already quite some time ago to Worldview Impact and the Eric Bremley associated projects we've been discussing today. And that has been from Earth Bank to them. There's other projects as well in the Sundarbans. About 40,000 new mangrove and erosion control trees have been planted, which includes payment for carbon being sequestered. So we're talking about, hundreds of thousands of euros have been going into this whole watershed already, Jeff. And so what we're not talking about is theoretical. It's actually happening already. We've got some cool photos on our website about some of the mangrove tree planting and the carbon sequestration and ecosystem services. And once the trees are planted, then it's about maintaining it. And what are the economic drivers that will incentivize the local community to protect those trees, the life of the trees, or make a productive use of it. So in the case of mangrove forests, it turns out that wildcraft organic honey production is a good way to then help finance that, to incentivize local community to care for and protect the mangrove forest, because then they're able to produce organic honey from the mangrove forest rather than getting paid $1 or $2 a day to deforest it and turn mangroves into charcoal for cooking. So, you can start with carbon payments and planting, but unless there's ongoing incentives and sustainable livelihoods, we go right back to where we came from, which was deforestation and land degradation. Now, there's the UN Convention to Combat Desertification and Land Degradation Neutrality target that more than 150 countries have signed up to, including India, which is going to take a big role in this. And so that's part of the reason why we're in India, because where India leads, it's important. And so yeah, hope that gives a bit of the answer to your question.
The money, I get the mangroves, the money that's gone to Bremley's outfit, has that actually gone down to particular individual farmers yet?
So as I understand it, it has. It's gone through. It went through the non-profit associated with the project. Is my understanding. But Brem, please.
Brem, would you like?
Yes, sure.
Come in.
So we have 30 farmers in our cooperative society, and now we've expanded the project. We've got another 5,000 trees. So we're going to expand this to other states, and now, like I said, we have 100,000 farmers under one union.
Yeah.
And imagine one farmer with 1 hectare. That means 100,000 hectares all across northeast India and beyond. Big scale. So this is it's very less. The carbon payment when we started was just like, I don't know, less than 5 euros or something. But now, I think in Europe it's $65 per ton, and once the price of carbon hits $100 per ton, that's what we're talking a fair price for the whole world. I mean, if those farmers on the ground get pittance, they're going to cut down all the trees because there's no use keeping them on the ground. But if we get a fair price for sequestration, for keeping those trees alive at $100 per ton, then they can go a lot more than just pittance. They should be able to build schools, hospitals, roads, send their kids to proper school, feed them properly, and start their own kitchen gardens with organic food, and add on and build better homes. So it has to be a more holistic approach and not just carbon. So that's what I like about Earth Bank, is they're moving beyond carbon into nature-based solutions and creating a whole marketplace for ecosystem services. And I hope that our government, at least Meghalaya, will start natural capital accounting in the state, where the government will value forests, will value aquifers, will value wetlands, will value biodiversity beyond carbon. Mangroves alone, 1 hectare, produces $200,000 of total economic benefits. That means 1 tree produces $100 of value every year. And it costs just $1 to plant 1 tree. So with $1, you get $100 of total economic benefits. And it's a no-brainer. We shouldn't even look at carbon and capture storage that costs $600 for 1 ton. It just doesn't make any sense. So the more we invest in people, per dollar invested, the more benefits we create, and hundreds of millions of farmers globally can get these green jobs while protecting their lands and their economies and their livelihoods. So there you go.
Yeah. But are the farmers in Meghalaya, besides you, who have had their carbon in their soil estimated by satellite and being paid as a result? Has that happened yet?
Not yet.
Jeff, Bremley is sitting in an area back from this. He may not have heard your first question perfectly. Just to answer, payments have been made to Wellview Impact, which is a non-profit, and as I understand it, carbon payments have been distributed to some of the 30 farmers that are involved in the project. Brem may not have heard that, he's on the other side of the room. In Meghalaya, that's our first project that we're working with on that particular. It's around about, I think, expanded to about 60 hectares now, and there's over 100 trees and plants. Cash crops have been planted with agroforestry systems, and I think now there's another 5,000 trees with fruit. So it's expanding all the time.
This is great, but what I need is the whole system working for at least one person. With a full sample.
So those 30 people, as I understand it, those 30 people it's working for them.
And they have the satellite measurement on their ground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got a lot of data, very extensive audit reports, which I think we've shared some of that with you on previous calls, some of the audit reports. So the 30 people who are responsible for managing the agroforestry systems, they're the ones who are able to receive the carbon payments by the non-profit local partner, which we always try to work with a good local non-profit partner. For example, so in Meghalaya, there's local impact in the Sundarbans. We work with the Microfinance Society, which is a self-help group. They have 23,000 local community members. Rishabh, could you talk about how many women and men and also students have been paid for carbon in the Sundarbans? I think you've got some of that data top of mind.
I can definitely share, Jeff, the details of that, but there's several hundred, I would say, of people who got paid for planting and protecting trees in the Sundarbans. And I would say almost half of them are women, and most of them are young people, like below the age of 35.
Was that on the basis? I'm sorry to dominate the conversation. Was that on the basis of the satellite measurements? Because that's what makes it sexy. It's the thinking in newspaper terms, how you actually get this into a paper and make it live.
I think it's a combination. We also do the ground truthing as well, because we're working with Bremley and others. But yes, on top of that, we do the satellite monitoring and surveillance as well. So yes, it is definitely on that.
And you could find me a named farmer if needs be.
Sorry?
You can find me a named farmer who's benefited if needs be.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Sure, yeah. And we've actually been developing the software as a service for these self-help groups, Jeff. So we are familiar with the names of about 23,000 that we want to expand to. So we have a target of planting 10 million trees in that particular region of the Sundarbans. And you need a lot of people to be able to scale up. And that's why we work with institutions that are big and we can scale with. And also we can start small with their agile, because you need to prove out your methodology, with a small focused project. And that's what we've been doing, as I mentioned, do the pilots, do the MVPs, and then scale. So we're here sharing the story about, the minimum viable products and has been proven. And now we're scaling up, not just in India, but also many other regions in Africa, South America, Central America. So, yeah.
Also, Jeff, what I would say that a lot of this land is also community-owned land, so it's not only private land. Farming and agriculture, it was traditionally never done privately. It became privately, in the later part, but a lot of these watersheds we are talking about, these embankments where mangroves need to be planted, they are not always private land. I mean, Meghalaya is in a unique position where they have a lot of private land, but many of these farmers are also growing trees and protecting trees in community-owned land.
The community is great. I just need... The story needs a spot on God's earth where you can show the thing actually happening. It really stands up, and then you can do all the scaling up and all the rest of it to understand it. But otherwise, it's words. So one needs a concrete example.
We'll have to, Jeff. We'll have to move on to other people, but yes, we can get you the data you need.
That'd be fabulous. I can see, someone I might be able to sell that to now. So I'm very much in the market.
Sounds good, Jeff. And just one final cap-off remark about that. We've audited about 1 million hectares of forest in Peru, in the Amazon. Now, tens of thousands of euros of carbon has been sold from those projects, and it does get distributed to at least 600 farmers. So that's another example. That's a massive scale project. And us being a carbon market, we can enable that to happen. So that's another example of really scaling up, moving beyond MVPs and pilots to much larger scale.
We have a question. We have a question here in the room.
And it sounds like Joanna's been doing exactly that, helping self-organize. So thank you for sharing what you're doing. It's so important that kids are part of that cultural change, that they can take action and not be stuck in eco-anxiety, and that cultural change really happens and that's nurtured, and an environment of safety is created. So that's, thank you for sharing that, Joanna. And I guess our ambition is to help enable that all around the planet, so that as kids grow up, their parents, their family are getting a financial income stream that actually, could make up 33% of their income for caring for their local environment and their local ecosystem services. We see that future as being so important if we are to create a stable, safe world for all. And Christopher, thanks for sharing also about the curricula, and schools, and again, it's that forefront of knowledge management, culture change, awareness change, and oriented to action. And I wish that when I was a kid that we had spent a lot more time in the outdoors, and in schooling and learning all about the ecosystems and indigenous knowledge, ways of knowing and being, which in Scotland, there are so many, I see the hedge growers are making a comeback, this traditional knowledge where, hotspots of biodiversity and otherwise landscapes that were lacking trees are, filled with biodiversity and birds and insects coming back. It feels like there's that, if we bring the culture change, the action orientation into schooling, that's the key, because the people who don't learn about the value of ecosystems, they don't value them, and I think that's key. What are our values? What do we really value as human beings? And this comes back to what's the broader narrative here for humanity. What are we doing this all for? Why do we go and do what we do? And I think if we can all be part of helping create a narrative change around, what it is to achieve one's human potential and what is the potential for our planet Earth collectively, with so many different life forms, the myriad expression of life, we start to go into a deeply philosophical realm, which it's each to their own, but ultimately if we can agree on some key principles of our collective narrative and story and embed that in culture and education from a young age, we have so much more of a better chance of the human species thriving and not just becoming a footnote in Gaia's experiments, or the planet's experiments, or however we want to look at it. So I guess that's what I'm really hoping and praying for.
So thanks, Tom, for those powerful words, and thanks everyone for joining. And in terms of childhood and adventure, I just say that my son is here, who's 4 years old, and we took a train journey all the way from Stockholm. Took us about 2.5 days. And on his hat, look at the biodiversity, everything from camels to octopus, elephants, snails, and it says, "Adventure explorers, life is good in the wood." And he's been going around COP, talking to negotiators, or sometimes just looking at them with this observer badge. So he wears this on his hat. This is one option, and then he wears a jacket with insoles. That's the other option for us. So, and it's amazing how he's attracted people taking photos, because this COP is not that inclusive, and it doesn't really include the voice of young people and children. But I hope that we change that. I hope we are able to be more inclusive, because we're all in this together, and of course the future generations will face that much more than us. So thanks everyone. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep the climate action going, and look forward to meet you on social media, on LinkedIn, on future events. We hope to keep this going. Take care. Greetings from Glasgow.